a long time ago, and then went on to work with Yahoo, and then post that with Line Group, and then started IH Capital. That's enough about me. About you guys, I just want to know how many of you are actually students here. Okay, pretty much everyone there. So and all of you are from engineering field? Okay, great. Anyone from non-engineering? Which field? Sorry? BCom. Great. So, right, can anyone complete this expression for me? What comes to mind when you first see this? Sorry? Can you finish it? Can you give me the next 3 digits? Great. 259 I think, but let's check. 592 actually. Anyways, so what happens is mostly engineers are aware of this, and I was expecting someone to finish this off. But anyway, so that's pretty much precisely my point as to why currently the finance sector actually suits engineering students and people with a math background rather than doing an MBA or some such degree for trading role. Right, so, but then all of you are from an engineering stream, right? So there must have been some sort of a thought process before you took this branch that you're studying right now. So I would like to, has anyone actually gone on and thought, why would you want to have a career in finance? First of all, how many of you would actually consider a career in finance? By a show of hands, everyone, right? So you sir, why would you want to be in finance, the career option? Okay. Great. Anything else? Any other reason? Okay. So his answer was he is pretty good at maths and he wants to make more money. Can anyone think of any other reason? Yeah. Sorry? True, but do you know any finance person who's actually self-employed? Okay. So typically, I mean, these fields would need they have a very high barrier of entry unless you're sitting at home and trading. So you really won't find in general people starting a trading shop or a brokerage or something on their own. It's a very rare scenario. I'm sorry, I didn't get the name. Sumit. So Sumit has put it pretty precisely. This is a quote from one of my favorite movies, Show Me the Money. Jerry Maguire, I think all of you must have seen it at some point. Right, so when I say show me the money, it need not necessarily mean you want to make a lot of money. There are plenty of ways to make money, but I think this is one field where you are handling a lot of money. Even the smallest of transactions would probably be a very high value. So if you are really interested in that kind of a thing and it gives you an adrenaline rush, then this is the right place to be. Right, so having said that, just feel free to stop me whenever you want to ask any questions. As engineering graduates, what are the possibilities that come up? There are obviously the obvious verticals, investment banking, VC, PE, and of course there are hedge funds on the trading side, brokerages, sell side, and are all of you aware of what investment banking really is? Can anyone tell me what investment banking is?
They give ideas where to invest.
Okay.
They provide program analysis.
Okay. That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
It just helps in raising funds.
Exactly. So essentially, you are trying to give access to people who need money, giving them access to the capital markets. Capital markets could pretty much mean banks, exchanges, or non-structured lending and so on. So these are the obvious choices, but as a tech graduate, the natural choices probably in iBanking would not be the deal making, but more or less support probably. if you're really good at number crunching, analytics, developing analytics, and these are pretty important part of it. In the VC sector, if you're really good, generally VC firms would actually hire a couple of postgraduates at least from each sector. People who are really good with really good with one field, and they become sector specialists. Not really undergrads though. This is not a natural career choice, I would say, in my opinion at least. But if you look at the other vertical, which is trading, which basically means both the buy side and the sell side. Now I'll go into what the buy side and sell side really mean. There are plenty of options that actually are a perfect fit for people who have really good math skills and have a little bit of, as engineers, as tech people, in this day it's almost impossible to actually get through your entire undergrad without actually ever writing some code or the other. In some software, it need not really be a program but MATLAB or something. There will be some software where you would actually have to write code, and as long as you're familiar with those kind of tools, these are very perfect fits for those tools. And that's why you will find a lot of trading firms actually prefer recruiting freshers from colleges, engineering colleges and tech. I mean, when I say engineering, I mean all sorts of tech fields. They prefer tech students rather than going for a B school. And the reason is simple. It's much easier to train someone to teach quant to someone who's already very good at math rather than teaching math to someone who thinks he has a flair for the market. Right, so what do we really mean? What are the different trading kind of entities that exist today? One would be prop desk, which are pretty much what he mentioned earlier. I would start my own shop, I would become a member with one of the exchanges, and I start trading with my own money, or I raise money from someone, but I'm trading for myself essentially. Then there are hedge funds, which are basically the same thing, but it's not really active trading, but you're more or less investing. You're not really connecting to an exchange or anything, but you're pretty much investing, and you have sector-specific hedge funds as well, which only do technology verticals, infrastructure, and so on. But broadly speaking, you would always find two kinds of roles. One is the buy side and the other is the sell side. What we mean by buy side, the sell side is people who are basically selling services like brokerages, for example. They are not actually trading, but they are selling a service through which you are actually able to trade. And when I say a broker, I mean of course, there is the India Bulls and so on who are the retail brokers. Basically they are selling to individuals. But I'm talking of more like institutional brokers like let's say a Goldman Sachs or even a Nomura now, formerly Lehman Brothers, but now Nomura. Now what these do is they provide connectivity to people who want to trade. They act as a middleman between the people who want to trade and the exchanges. That's the sell side. They are only offering a service. But to connect people, there is abundant amount of technology input that goes in to connect two people, to connect the trader to the exchange, and that's where the sell side would need tech graduates. Then there is the buy side, which are basically the prop houses, hedge funds, and so on, which need a lot of people to develop models, modify existing models, and implement those models, develop platforms which actually connect and trade, platforms which help you in developing models, and so on. And then, of course, there are cases where you don't really know much of coding, but you're really good at maths. There are options for those as well. Like for example, the bottom part which I have, the algorithmic development part of it, where it's a pretty hard field. How many of you have actually heard of this thing called algorithmic trading here? So, have you guys heard of this firm called Tower Research, which I think keeps visiting IT Bombay a lot? Right. So so algorithmic trading is one field where you are basically removing the human being from the picture and trying to put in automated logics to make the trading decisions. So now this, the moment I say it, I'm sure you agree that it's like a perfect fit for those who can actually understand what a binary tree means, or anything like that essentially. So, any questions so far?
Yes. Are there any algorithms to identify arbitrage opportunities? Is there any product?
No, so there are a lot of people who sell products. Identifying arbitrage opportunity is nothing but just looking at two numbers and saying they are not equal. So that should be very easy to build. Right?
Is there any existing product out there which does?
A lot of them. I think the most popular in India is something called as PT. But to be honest, the era when you could buy a product off the shelf and plug it in and it starts working is gone. Because if anything is too easy, it doesn't stay for long. Right. So the plain vanilla pure arbitrage. Does everyone understand what arbitrage means? No. So arbitrage basically means, let's say there are two shops selling the same thing. Let's say it's a MacBook, for example. One guy says it's 1,000, the other guy is ready to sell it at 1,010. What you do is you buy from the first guy and sell it to the second guy. There's theoretically no loss making that can happen here because you have two fixed prices and you can buy at one and sell at the other. So what this transforms to in the financial world basically is, if you have two exchanges which are essentially quoting the same, let's say an Infosys stock for example, two different exchanges quoting at two different prices, you could buy on one and sell on the other. That's basically called arbitrage. It doesn't, plain pure arbitrage, as simple as I said, doesn't exist. Today it's a lot more complex than buying in one place and selling at the other. Nowadays it would involve a lot more prediction about the gap actually presenting itself. So now that's where you can actually develop your quant models also, where you can, and moreover today you have so much information that the exchange itself gives about the market data, that looking at numbers, essentially looking at how many people are ready to buy and how many people are ready to sell, just looking at that you can develop some sort of a prediction that is likely to go up over here and likely to go down over here. And whenever you see that gap presenting itself, buy at one and sell at one. So even if you develop some model to make that prediction, typically the efficiency would only last for about 4 or 5 months and you constantly need to keep changing it. So that's why again most firms invest a lot of money in having people who can figure these things out rather than buying off-the-shelf products. Right, and of course the last vertical that I really want to put an emphasis on is the connectivity and the network. These are typically very non-finance sounding roles, but take it from me that a person who can figure out how to connect from building A to building B in the fastest possible manner is probably the most valuable asset today in algorithmic trading. Simply because it's so rare to get people who really understand what a router does, or how a signal actually travels from one end to the other, what sort of redundancies exist and what alternatives exist. That it's a pretty rare commodity, and a good network specialist is as good as the best trader in the world perhaps. But then why is it that trading companies are actually warming up to tech rags rather than taking existing traders already? Why not absorb the existing offline guys into algorithmic trading? The reason why we are talking of this now is because firms are willing to spend so much money. As you can see, the grey part here is basically the technology spent on US alone. The blue is on Euro, and the green is basically the non-Euro and non-American areas. So and this is just by American firms put together. The data is from a magazine called Algorithmic Trader. So if you look at this, you can clearly see that there's a pretty, and this is only till 2010. If you look at 2014 also, there's a pretty old slide. The spend would be far higher, and if you look at it, $8 billion in just deployment of technology is not small. So when I say deployment of technology, I actually mean designing routers, building platforms, which is basically software again. Building faster ways of the same logic. For example, let's say you just want to do multiplication of two numbers. There are different ways of actually achieving it if you go down to the gate level. Now, what is the fastest way of actually doing it? Someone who knows that makes a faster algorithm. So, and that pretty much, especially in cases like buying in one place and selling in another, that's what makes the difference. And when I say faster, one might wonder how fast is it? Does it really matter? Let me tell you, in the Indian market, pure arbitrage probably exists for maybe 10 or 20 microseconds and not more. And when I say that, what I mean is someone who's able to spot that difference is able to spot it, choose to buy, and actually buy and sell within those 20 microseconds. So that's 20 times 1 millionth of a second. So that's pretty fast. And every time you add a, how many of you are familiar with C programming over here? Right, so every time, C, and I'm guessing C++ as well. So every time you instantiate a class, typically you would spend a microsecond on it. So now these kind of decisions when you're actually implementing something can only come when you've had enough exposure to actually writing it. So that's the reason why firms are spending so much money in actually finding people who understand what's actually happening, rather than just plainly saying you can buy in one place and sell in the other. So yeah, if you look at the old days, and when I say old, it's not more than 10 years ago, you can see that the system is pretty simple back then. There's an exchange which pretty much sends market data. Some people probably store it somewhere. And then there is an application which shows up on a screen where people keep pressing buy and sell or whatever, enter a price and pay. It's a very simple 3-module system. There's an exchange, there's a server, and there's a desktop where someone is sitting and pretty much looking at market data. But if you look at the transformation that has happened in the last 10 years is this. The picture has got a lot more clutter. You see a lot more modules there. The meaning of a lot more modules basically means there are a lot more places where the logic can break. There is this new thing that comes up which is called a complex event processing engine. That's a very abstract umbrella term that we use for anything that can automatically make a decision. Pretty much an engine that takes in market data and says buy or sell. How it makes the decision, what logic goes in it, it really depends on what you're putting into the engine itself. But essentially that's the term we give for that. But if you look at this again, obviously there are so many connections in between. The exchange sends market data, it is stored, it goes on to a normalizer. There is something called as a normalizer, and what a normalizer basically would do is there are different. So now there was a time when there was pretty much one exchange in a country and people would trade there. So but now if you look at the US, there are probably more than 20 exchanges with very high volume. In fact, just to give you a number, probably the volume that happens, the number of Apple trades, Apple shares that get traded just on NASDAQ is actually more than the entire volume on NSE, for example. And so the moment you have many exchanges coming up, what happens is different exchanges are trying to optimize and develop their own systems to publish market data and receive orders. So now a guy who's sitting and listening to all of them needs to actually understand, it's like understanding 20 different languages and trying to interpret 20 people talking in different languages and understanding what they say. So that's the job of the normalizer, essentially understanding different languages and presenting it in one common language. So this didn't exist. So again, here you have a lot of technology that gets deployed. These are the two main components where a significant amount of time is taken in perfecting. So yeah. So I don't think going into detail with this diagram is of within the scope of a 30-minute talk, but yeah, I mean you can see that if you just compare these two images, you can see that there's a lot more clutter in the older one. Yeah, then compared to this one. So of course, then this is something that has been true for almost 10 years now. Most technology innovations, especially those which concern latency, have happened either in the United States Army or in the algorithmic trading world. And that's not an exaggeration, that's really true. I'll walk you through a few examples of what has happened. But even things that you hear what Google is trying to do today, which is driverless cars and all, have already been experimented with by, you must have heard of DARPA. Has anyone heard of DARPA? Yeah, so DARPA used to have this, back when I was in college, they used to have this driverless car challenges across the Paris-Dakar circuit. And I think Stanford and CMU won it in my year. But essentially it's a concept that's already been developed. Even internet, if you look at it, was developed first by the US Army, by DARPA itself in fact. It was called the DARPANET also before it became internet. And so many things like your modern wireless communication came up in the algo trading world again. There's a lot of innovations that happen which we use in everyday life today, which have actually happened because of the need to do things faster and faster, and that's where technology comes in. So this is one example. This is a term that we very often use, and not many people in the trading world actually even understand it. It's something called as a kernel bypass. What does a kernel bypass mean? How many of you understand operating systems and have ever written a code that sends a packet on the wire? Okay, great. So you obviously know how a network packet is sent. There is something in the user, just to, I mean you guys are all engineering students, so I'll organize it a bit. There is a program running in memory which pretty much sends a packet on the wire, but what happens when it's sending is it hands over the packet to the operating system. The operating system sends an interrupt to stall all processing on the CPU. It then transfers the packet from the user memory, puts additional, like a from and to address, which we call as headers and trailers, reaches the socket buffer, and it is then sent. But this whole journey actually costs typically about single-digit microseconds. Now, in our need to actually do it faster than that, someone in the trading world actually came up with this concept of why does the operating system actually, it's pretty much like you're deciding to post a letter, and you hand the letter to someone else, then someone puts it in an envelope, writes a from and to, and then goes and posts it. So kernel bypass is pretty much similar to why do I have to spend time in actually handing it over to someone when I can myself post it, when I can write the from and to. I don't have to hand it over to someone. So basically removing the operating system out of the picture. Then someone else did a further innovation on this. They realized that why does the software even need to run in memory at all? Why can't it run on the network device itself, so that there's no one receiving the packet and putting it in memory and then working on it and then sending it back. So that the whole thing now in today's world, what actually happens is there's no program that's actually running at all in the memory as you know it. It's all happening on the hardware itself, and that's the extent to which technology has progressed in the trading world today. And there is no concept of, there's very limited concept of actually writing code, compiling a C program and using it for trading. It's more like you only use it for testing, and the program is then an how many of you know what an FPGA means? Right, so the code is basically broken down into an FPGA code, and it's burnt into the FPGA, and the strategy actually runs in hardware from then on. So now all this effort to save those single-digit microseconds, and that is still today. And now we are actually talking of much more advanced forms of innovation where, for example, the next innovation that we speak of, the microwave communication, came as a result of wanting to cut down even that one microsecond from the picture. As you all know, what is the speed of light in vacuum? Does anyone know the speed of light through glass? Sorry? Can you speak a bit louder? Great. So the fastest fiber optic cable, which basically means sending a signal through glass, has been 200,000 kilometers per second. So which is roughly about 1.3 to 1.5 times lesser. So now what that means is, when someone is sitting in, say, Chicago and listening to the market data from New York, NYSE, the distance is about 770 kilometers, 770 miles. It takes about 15 milliseconds for the signal to actually get there on a fiber optic cable. So now once people started breaking down the software and putting it on a hardware, then eventually over a period of 4 or 5 years, everyone came down to the same level of innovation. That's what happens normally, right? Some guy innovates and then everyone builds around that thing. So now what people have come up with is, because obviously light travels faster than air, you can't obviously achieve vacuum between New York and Chicago, but there is air. You don't have to go through glass. So now people are actually transmitting using an ancient 1950s technology called microwave transmission, which actually proved to be much faster than sending a signal through fiber optic. Now that's something that's happening now. I mean, not even, I don't think too many firms in the US probably do it even today. There are just probably 4 or 5 firms that have advanced to this level. But that you can imagine that, because all this, I'm just telling you all this just to drive home the point about how important that little millisecond or microsecond gets, and hence the technology involved in it. Right. So, how many of you, can you tell me, this has always existed, okay? Before your fiber optic cables came, all your wireless phones and all used to work on microwave itself. There has always been radars, airports, air traffic control works on microwave. Can you think of any reason why we preferred using fiber optic over transmission through air? Sorry? Yeah, that's one reason. But let's say the big reason, in my opinion, though, was the fact that the weather change will start affecting your transmission.
Reduce attenuation.
Sorry?
Reduce attenuation.
Reduce?
Attenuation.
Right. So what happens then is, when you talk of long distances like Chicago to New York, let's say there's a storm coming in between, your trading signal might get broken. So you actually decided to buy in NYSE and sell in Chicago. You've sent the buy signal, but it never reached the exchange. It reached after a few seconds. Now that's why over time, for the sake of reliability, we preferred actually having a physical line in between. But now again, the need to be faster has actually made us revert back to reverse the cycle and go back to older technology now. But however, the fastest microwave link today is about 150 megabytes per second, which is not much considering the trading world. So there's still a lot of scope for improvement here, which basically transfers to a lot of jobs essentially at the end of the day. So Yeah. Right. So now what does that mean in terms of so today as an algo trading firm, for example, we hire a lot of people. We only go to engineering colleges, for example. At IRIX Capital, we hire a lot of people from IIT Bombay as well, and we only come here for. We only go to the tech grad school. Why is that? What are the gaps we see today, and what are the rare commodities? Let me put it that way. In today's market, is people who are really good at natural language processing. Why is that? Because see, there in the trading world there are always phases. There was a phase about 5 years ago when everyone started doing arbitrage, buy in one place, sell in the other, and it was the easiest way to make money. Then slowly everyone started doing it, and only one guy can actually close the gap. So then people realized it's not very profitable now that everyone has started doing it. Then there will be a phase where people there's something called a statistical arbitrage, but essentially there are phases when someone innovates and people follow it. So right now, there's been a lot of focus in something called as news-based analytics. What that means is, no matter what logic you use, let's say, let's take May, June this year, right? At some point, let's say, because the BJP government came, the markets pretty much zoomed. But then if a computer is actually listening to it, how does it even understand what that means? So now that's where we are trying to put a lot of effort, not only us, a lot of people in this business are trying to do, is actually read news and actually try to quantify it, which actually brings people who can understand it. And obviously most news feeds are in English. So people who are able to listen to English language and actually parse it using automated methods. That's one area. The other obviously is error detection. An algorithm also needs to be able to differentiate between, say, someone putting a mock message on Twitter versus someone actually reporting a news, for example. This actually happened recently when someone basically put up a Twitter message that White House has been bombed, which was more a joke or what, I don't know, but there was a blip in NYSE because of that. Essentially, there was a Twitter message that came up saying the White House is down, and then there was 2 minutes later there was a clarification from Obama's office that nothing of that sort has happened, and the NYSE basically went down and up in 13 crores. So people say that there's no way of actually knowing if that has actually happened, but people say that the correlation between the blip and this Twitter message was so strong, and it's so minimal in terms of microseconds, that it's not possible that a human being would have heard that and actually performed those trades. It's actually an algorithmic trading platform that has made that. So it's very important to actually be able to detect errors in the messages as well. Then of course, pattern recognition. If let's say, for example, the Fed chiefs, let's say the RBI governor in the local context, every word he says is probably most watched, and he may not really be saying anything bad if you listen to if someone else was saying the exact same thing, it won't really matter. But because it's the RBI governor saying it, people try to find what the tone is, whether it's a positive note, and those kind of things. Now, that if an algorithm could actually do it and quantify it in terms of positivity, that there's a positive pattern in his speech, essentially. That kind of a thing. Then of course there are the hardware engineers. Probably natural language processing probably caters to a very small set of engineering graduates. Probably the CS and maybe electrical also. But hardware engineer is something that would span a lot broader area. What I mentioned earlier, where you don't actually build strategies to run in the memory anymore, but actually have strategies on the chip itself. There are a lot of firms which actually invest a lot in building chips which have one strategy built in. As you all know, building an ASIC chip and then changing it is not feasible. You need to actually fabricate a new chip again. So, like I mentioned earlier also, any strategy that you build works for about 4 or 5 months. Beyond that, you need to keep tweaking it. So, strategies which work for say about 6 months cannot be actually put into a chip itself. But there are firms who actually spend a lot of money in having, let's say, a pure app strategy, for example. Like I know of a firm, without taking names, who's actually spent money in building a processor with gold connectors so that the signal travels faster on the chip itself. So that's the level of innovation that we're looking for when I say hardware engineers. Then of course there are the network specialists, finding the shortest path between two places. If you look at it, there were a lot of firms that were not actually that did not actually have offices in Bombay at one point, connected to Indian markets. Calcutta, Delhi and so on. But today if you sit in Calcutta and send a trade, it takes about 30-40 milliseconds to actually reach Bombay. The reason? Because it's not a straight line. It's traveling through multiple routers somewhere, going all the way and just reaching Bombay in a very twisted route. But had there been a network specialist who could actually optimize this network and find a provider who provides the shortest path, that's the easiest way of cutting down time, getting closer to the exchange itself. So, but this did not happen for a long time. It might sound very obvious right now, but years had been spent before someone thought, hey, why not actually move to Bombay and sit right next to the exchange. And then of course there is the kernel bypass that I spoke of, which in my opinion has been one of the biggest innovations in this field. Then of course there are the data scientists. This is such a popular buzzword today that almost every course, anything to do with statistics actually says this somewhere in their brochure. Now why do we need data? Who is a data scientist? Anybody who is able to understand data essentially, who is able to go through data and figure out some non-random pattern there. It's pretty much the guy who can find the needle in the haystack. In a lot of cases, when you, let's say you are a firm and you're trying to connect to a new geography, let's say there's a firm that wants to connect to India, for example. No firm will actually go and tell another person that this is the strategy we use and this is what makes money to for us. There are very few firms which even tell how much money they are even making. In the trading world I'm talking about. So no firm would actually volunteer the information about what strategy makes that money for them. So it's very important when you entering a new job. How many of you attended yesterday's workshop about setting up shop? Yeah, so setting up shop in a new place is not easy. It has its own set of complications and takes about significant investment in terms of money and time as well. So when you want to enter a new job, how do you make that decision to actually whether I should go or not? What is the opportunity cost of not going there? And does it justify the investment that I would be putting in? So if someone were to connect to India, what would they do? They can get hold of all the data over the last 6-7 months of whatever instrument they want. Now what do I do with this data? So this is where the data scientist would probably come in, and you are not even sure if there is a strategy that works here. There is just data here, lots of data points and how the market has moved over the last 10 years. And the job of this guy is basically to find just patterns about some sort of sense in the maze that exists and say that you know, if the bid and ask are spread by 1 rupee, this is how much you can probably capture, something of that sort. So that's where the data scientists play a really big role in terms of strategy development. The same set of strategies that work in India will not work elsewhere. Something that works elsewhere will not work in India, for example. Like the arbitrage example that you mentioned. At the point at which it was working in India, there was no way it could have worked in the US, because it was already an older strategy there. So just by looking at market data, you can make that up. I mean, you can obviously see how often there are pricing inefficiencies, like the prices on two destinations differ. So just by looking at that, you know, arbitrage won't work here, for example. So that's the job of the data scientist in our field, essentially. Yeah, and that sort of brings us to the end, and I'm open to questions. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about the data science, having the brain,
Okay.
not from the technology perspective.
Right.
But yeah, of course we have seen, how trades go on, millisecond, how trades go on.
Yeah.
So now you can catch it.
Yeah.
So these kind of things, if you work with data science, say we are investment firm and we want to work with data science. Is it worth with the investment because the data, the data regards to this geography,
फोन किसके पास है? सभी के पास ही है। तुम जो काउंटर पे जो लिखते हैं ना, हाँ बस
Is it worth it?
वही है फोन।
Let me put it this way.
हाँ, दे दो।
There are firms who do it and recover the cost.
दे दे सबका ले।
But the question of is it worth it will differ, because let's say someone like Goldman Sachs probably would think the money that comes out of if you're looking at, say, an arbitrage opportunity exists, for example. Someone like a Goldman, probably, let's say there is a potential of maybe $1 million a month, for example, on the currency futures. Suppose, let's pick a figure, and your data scientist actually comes up with this figure. For an independent prop house sitting out of Bombay, that's probably a lot of money. But say for a Goldman Sachs, that's not. So they may not want to actually shift based and set up office here just to set up an arbitrage desk, versus a prop house deciding to do it on its own. So, but whether the cost can be recovered, I think a lot of people do it already and they do recover the cost. We ourselves do it, so it can easily be. Yeah, please.
So you mentioned about FPGAs.
Yeah.
How popular is it in this part of the world?
Right. In India, the problem, it's not really a problem, it's probably a good thing in a sense, is the exchanges try to limit the number of orders that you send. What that basically means is, let's say NSE says you can only send about 400 messages per second. What happens to the 401st second message? Different exchanges do it in a different way. NSE chooses to block it. So what happens? So how do they block it? They have a process in between you and the exchange also, with a second process that stands. Now what happens in this kind of a mechanism is, unfortunately, is the jitter that happens. This process that stands in between, you have no control over. It's the exchange's process that blocks the message. So the network jitter that happens is of the order of double-digit microseconds. So you trying to put an FPGA and saving single digits probably doesn't make any sense when the network jitter itself is going to lose you, say, 20-30 microseconds. So if you save an extra microsecond, it's not like you're really sure you're the first guy to hit the exchange, because there's someone else in between who might be a little slow. So that's the reason why FPGA has not picked up anywhere. But there are a lot of, not every calculation results in an order and message to the exchange. So FPGA is not used to bake an entire strategy into it today. But let's say, are you from the trading? Okay. So there are some calculations. Say, let's say someone is trying to trade options. There are calculations which would take about for a few milliseconds if you write a program and try to do it, versus if you actually build a specific instruction set. So that would actually go into an FPGA. So typically vendors who sell FPGA solutions today in India would charge you anywhere between about 100K for the simplest ones to about 500K. So unless you are willing to spend that amount of money, you won't. Unless you are willing to spend that amount of money, you won't get it. So that's the second reason why it's not being sold. But internationally, if you see, it's almost the case in every big volume exchange.
Being from the technical side, you mentioned scope for a lot of hardware engineers.
Yeah.
You're saying the global market is big.
Global market is big, and in India itself, the exchange itself is a big customer for it. So the trader may not actually be sending this, but there are firms which provide solutions to exchanges across the world. For example, have you heard of this firm called Kairex? CHIX. It's yeah. Yeah, its founder is actually an Indian, in fact. What they do basically is they make engines, exchange style engines, order matching engines, and sell it to exchanges. So, and they build the fastest order matching engine so far, which is stationed in US. So, so an order matching engine is a lot more complex than building a trading software. So over there you have a lot of FPGA based solutions, even in India also. Right. So yeah, and of course we are hiring at IEdge. So if anyone's interested, if anyone thinks that they really understand how networks work and they're really good at C programming or C++ or even VLSI, please do apply. You have my email ID there. Any more questions? You can ask your placement cell. You came here last year. It depends on the experience.
The courses that you have offered,
Yeah.
will discount your yesterday's lecture.
Okay.
As a retail investor or something like that, do that typically?
Yeah.
Technical perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a lot of retail investors who are looking to who are full-time traders essentially, who want to use software to actually make their trading decisions and stuff. So it's not as easy, I would say, because although we equip you to do it, you cannot do algorithmic trading in India as a retail investor. No, it's not. You cannot do. That's the rule. You cannot do it. Yeah. So brokerage is allowed because exchange has no way of actually verifying if it's an algorithm order or not. But legally speaking, you're not allowed. Sorry. Yeah, Zerodha is one company that does. Yes. Zerodha does give you API to connect to the exchange and send orders and all that. But strictly speaking, a retail investor is not allowed to send algo. See, I mean, it's as simple as just forming an entity which becomes a client to a broker, and although that entity probably has just one way working for it. So, a lot of people do it. There are brokers who just do this, who give access to retail guys who are willing to put the money to write a program and put it on a server. So a lot of people do it. So for a lot of such people have taken our course also. So our course basically teaches you, it gives you an overview of the different tools that help you do it. And most of these tools are open source. So even a retailer can get hold of them. But you will, in general, the amount of cost input that is required to compete in a high frequency world is a little high for a retail person to do. So typically retail investors go for not for the medium or the low frequency kind of strategies. So the focus is more on monitoring thousands of instruments rather than doing quick trades on one instrument.
I have freshers for data scientists.
Yeah.
What are the
Sorry?
What are the prerequisites? Should they be from the statistics where
No, I mean, we don't have prerequisites, but since IIT gives us about, if you are talking about campus recruitment in IIT, because we are forced to do it within 4 or 5 hours, we select a few branches so that to reduce the number of people. But as such, there is no prerequisite. We have our own mechanisms to filter the people out, so as long as we cross all our rounds, we will be. So thanks guys, thanks for attending the workshop and hope to hear from you soon.